Hi guys, Chili Bin here. I started thinking first on the Appalachian Trail, and a lot of the time since then, that I'd really like to have 100% homemade gear. And I know that some things it's not as easy to do. I'm not going to try and make my own shoes, and I'm not going to try and make my own sleeping pad, but pretty much everything else I'd like to try and make myself. I've already got a tent in the works. I've started working on a prototype. I'd also like to make a double quilt for Raiden and I, and lots of various clothing for us both. Right now I'm going to start working on my pack prototype. I've got several designs I've been looking at, and I'm drawing inspiration from a lot of different packs that I've seen, picking and choosing the features that I like best. I've got a pattern which I'm going to start with, but straight away I plan on modifying this pattern to make it something more like what I want to make. And then from there I'm going to make a prototype out of Tyvek, and we're going to try that out on a few trips, see how it goes before we make a real version. Let's get started, I guess. I'm starting out with the pattern for the 35 litre Mountain Flyer backpack. I bought this from Ripstock by the roll, printed it out on a large scale plotter and cut the pattern out. I like the idea of having the front panel as one large piece, sewing the mesh onto the piece and then folding it and enclosing the edges of the mesh inside the folded seam. So I plan on doing that. I started out by laying all the pieces down next to each other to get the overall large shape, and then traced this onto some paper to produce one big pattern piece. I used one piece to combine all of the front, and then a second piece to combine the lower front, or the bottom of the pack, with the back. I left the drink bottle pockets much the same, but altered the front stretch mesh a bit by making it wider at the bottom with some gathers, and then also shaping the top more. I also added a stretch mesh pocket to the bottom. I made several changes to the shoulder straps. I changed the shape of the bottom of the shoulder strap so it would accommodate a pocket, and also added a pocket higher up on the shoulder strap. I also made the padding in the shoulder strap stop higher up and created a new attachment system similar to one I'd seen online. Next it was time to cut everything out. I'm making this out of some Tyvek home wrap, which is left over from my prototype of the tent that I've been working on. For the stretch fabric on this prototype, I'm just using some polyester spandex that I had lying around. I'm eventually going to use some of this to make some tights for Raiden. For the padding and the straps, I'm just using some cheap closed-cell foam which is made for building a gym flooring. I just picked it up at Canadian Tire. Once everything was cut out, my first step was to sew some elastic onto the top of all the stretch panels. This would make sure that they didn't stretch out of shape while they were being used. Next, I pinned all of the stretch pieces in place. I used a smart water bottle to check the depth of the side pockets and decided I wanted to make them a little bit smaller, so I just chopped about an inch off the bottom of each one. Sewing these on was a real pain. The stretch fabric was a lot more mobile than I was expecting it to be. If this had been a real version of the pack, I would have stopped and pinned them on better. But because it's only a prototype, the neatness of them doesn't really matter. Next I pinned the stretch bottom pocket in place and then sewed it on. I pinned this one on much better than the previous ones, knowing how mobile the stretch fabric was. Next it was time for me to assemble the shoulder straps. I pinned the stretch for the pockets onto the straps and then sewed them in place. Now I added webbing loops for the attachment system between the straps and the pack itself. This attachment system is something I saw on a Make Your Own Gear forum online. The system between the straps and the side of the pack looked really secure and comfortable, so I thought I'd give it a go. It turned out I didn't find it very comfortable and it didn't work very well, so I got rid of it again, but that comes later. Next I attached the front and back of the shoulder straps together. Once these were sewn together, I snipped the corners and turned them in the right way, and then stitched it across to form a barrier for the padding. Next I stuffed the padding into the shoulder straps. The first one was a little bit tricky, but I used a better method for the second one. Next I attached the back to the front across the centre panel. I was ready to attach the straps to the back panel when I realised I didn't put any sternum straps onto the shoulder straps before I made them, so I had to make something up. I attached one at the bottom and then used my existing Gossamer gear bag to try and figure out how high up I wanted the second one to be. I just sewed these onto the outside of the straps. When I make the real version, I'll sew them into the shoulder strap arrangement. Now I could stitch the shoulder straps in place. I decided I wanted the top of this bag to be roll down, and I wanted to attach the sides of the roll down to straps coming out of the side seams. Then I got a little distracted and pinned the upper back to the back portion, and then returned to putting the straps into the side seams. The next thing to do was attach the shoulder strap attachment points to the side seams. I wasn't really certain where to put them, and I just kind of made this up as I went along. In hindsight, I probably should have tried to do it a little bit more scientifically, because it definitely didn't work out first time. I did try pinning everything together right side out and putting the shoulder strap attachments in and trying it on to see if it looked like it was in the right place, but it was a little bit difficult to do while it was still empty. I ended up just sewing the attachment points in place. Now it was time to assemble the whole bag. To do this, I started off with the seams at the front, and all I needed to do was fold the front and add a seam allowance. Then I pinned together around the curves of the bottom and all the way up the back. I used a ridiculous amount of pins, but I hoped that would make it easier to sew it all together, and it really did. I'm not entirely certain what I'll do with the real version of the bag. I'm not going to make it waterproof, but I want it to be water resistant, and if I put this many pins through it, it's definitely going to hinder that. I sewed about 80% of the second seam before realising that I didn't have a bobbin thread, and so I had to start it again. Now I could remove all the pins and turn the bag the right way out. Next I connected buckles for the roll down top and to secure the front of the stretch fabric. Now I laced up the side attachment points and loaded it up. I used Raiden's climbing gear and then a bunch of canned food to try and bulk it out. I was pretty unimpressed with the side attachment points, so they didn't line up right and it just didn't fit very comfortably. I tried relacing it again with something that didn't stretch as much, but it still didn't work very well. Here it is anyway. It's got a front stretch pocket, the side pockets, and then the attachment point for the roll down top to the side seam. It's kind of hard to see in this, but I installed a lacing system between the side and the shoulder straps to try and make more of a harness system. It also has a stretch bottom pocket. I decided at this point it was time to go back to my original theory of how to do the shoulder strap attachment. Instead of having the lacing system like I'd seen online, I would do a zigzag with 2 attachment points on the bag and 1 on the shoulder strap. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough webbing, and so I made some webbing out of Tyvek. Then I made the bottom and side attachment points. The next thing I had to do was turn the bag inside out, unpick the side seam, remove the existing attachment system, and then pin the new attachment system in place. Then I went back to the sewing machine and sewed them in. Once again, I didn't really put any thought or calculation into where I put these, I just put them in a spot that felt right. Now I could thread the straps back together and load the pack up so I could try it on again. I liked this pack attachment system much better than the first one, but I wish I put more thought into where I put the attachment points because they were a little bit low and it pulled at the wrong angle, so I had to unpick them and move them into the right spot. So here's my finished pack prototype. I really like the size of the pack, both in volume and dimensions. I'm still not certain about not having a hip belt, even if it's just for stabilization. But the plan is to use this pack a few times over the summer to see how much I like it, before buying some materials and making one for me and Raiden. What you just saw was 4.5 hours of pack making video footage condensed down to a 15-minute video. If you enjoyed watching that, please subscribe to my channel so you can catch the making of the real pack, as well as some of my other make your own gear projects that I've got coming up.